Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Thank you all for joining the podcast. Please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as sharing your comments in the comments section to help the channel's algorithm grow to reach more viewers. Today's guest in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is Brett Bevell. Brett is a fellow Reiki master, author, and many of you may know him from his courses offered at the Omega Institute. Brett's going to be discussing his journey into energy healing and Reiki, his powerful transformations, insights for everyday life, as well as an offered healing for all of us to take in. So, without further ado, we bring on Brett Bevell on the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. Brett Bevell, thank you so much for coming here and giving, your generous time to come here in the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm excited, and also, I'm just glad that we're connected. I know you've been coming to Omega now for a couple of years, and I know you'll be coming back again in the fall, and just really appreciate the offer to be on your podcast.
Oh, likewise, Brett, and I'm just so honored to cross paths with you. And, I've been following your work now for a bit of time, and believe it or not, we have over 100 episodes, and we've never had someone really focus on Reiki and healing. And you're the ultimate guest to bring that in because I know that's a big crux of your work and yourself. But for audience members who maybe haven't heard of your work and they probably have to be living under a rock because you're making, quite an impact, these days. Tell us a little bit about your story because, you've been doing this a long time.
Yeah. So my journey with energy healing really began in the early 1990s. And
Mm.
it's kind of an odd story. So I was living in New York City. I was working at a health food store. I didn't have a lot of money.
Mm.
I mean, I had a job, but I wasn't very wealthy,
Yeah.
and I had a wisdom tooth that needed to be pulled, and I didn't have a regular dentist. I didn't have health insurance, so, my way to get the wisdom tooth pulled was to go to the NYU Dental Center, basically, which meant that a student was working on me,
Oh.
and, the student was kind of arrogant and kind of rough,
Hmm.
and it was not a fun experience. I mean, it's
Right.
not a fun experience having a wisdom tooth taken out by a fully qualified certified dentist, but if you imagine a kind of a rough, angry
Mm.
student doing the job,
Is it? It was a double negative that wasn't a positive. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So after that experience, I probably looked like I'd been like in a boxing match with Muhammad Ali or something. I mean, I
Oh,
was in a
jeez.
lot of pain. My jaw was really swollen, and I went home. I had the good fortune of having a roommate, a fellow named Eben Dodd, who he was a Reiki practitioner and a massage therapist. He didn't really talk about Reiki, so I didn't know what Reiki was. I just knew on his business card it said massage therapy
Mm.
and Reiki. But when I got home that evening, he immediately saw my face and offered to do some Reiki on me. And as soon as his hands touched my face, I felt this sense of like being held by the universe, this sense of like, wow, there's this amazing energy coming through his hands.
Mm.
And it's allowing me to surrender into a place of just grace, like a feeling. It's not that the pain went away 100%. It went away significantly, like it significantly lessened.
Yeah.
If the pain was like at 100 starting, it probably was down like at around 15
Right.
during the session. So there was still some pain, but the main thing was like, where's this sense of wow, I know there's this sense of grace. I know there's this sense that I'm being held by the universe, and I know that I'm going to be okay and that I'm going to get through this.
Mm.
And so I was really just um, very interested in like, what is this Reiki stuff? Like, I want to learn more about it. So a couple weeks later, I went to his teacher, and Evan was a practitioner, but not a teacher. So I went to his teacher and learned the first degree from a woman named Elka Petra Palm, who I believe still teaches in New York City.
Hmm.
And then fast forward a few years later, I got my second degree in Ohio. I owned I was the co-owner of like a little new agey bookstore. And as part of the work we did, we were promoting a Reiki master in the area. And in exchange for that, she uh, initiated me and my business partner to second degree.
Hmm.
And then I got my third degree, master level in 1995 at Omega Institute, not on the grounds physically of Omega Institute, but during the staff classes there was a woman who was a Reiki master, and she let it be known. She wasn't teaching Reiki to the staff, but she was letting people know that if they had the qualifications and were interested in training with her, that there was that possibility. So I learned my master level from her, a woman named Mary Dudek, and her lineage traces back to William Rand. So after that experience, I eventually moved to San Francisco and uh, did some studies with a Hawaiian shaman, a fellow named Jack Gray, who was very, very old. He was in his 90s. He was also very short, had a very interesting sense of humor. He kind of reminded me of Yoda. And um, the interesting thing about him is he had actually known Hawaii Takata, who's the woman who brought Reiki to the United States. He had known her in Hawaii, and he he used to say how he felt that it was in his conversations with her that she actually decided to move to San Francisco, to really expand the light of Reiki in a more bigger way. But the main thing is that in the studies I was doing with him, I wasn't studying Reiki, but I was studying different shamanic techniques about connecting with your higher self.
Mm,
And I began to wonder, what if I combine some of those shamanic techniques? What if I intentionally attuned my higher self to Reiki? I mean, one could theorize and say, well, maybe your higher self already has Reiki or whatever, but
mhm.
I intentionally said, I'm going to attune my higher self to Reiki, and then I'm going to do these techniques he's talking about, communicating with my higher self. And then I'm going to ask my higher self to send Reiki and do things with Reiki. And I found I could do things that were outside the box of traditional Reiki training.
Yeah.
And so that became the methodology that was explored in my first couple of books.
Mm,
Um, and so then from there, it just kind of snowballed and grew and grew. So I was exploring these techniques and writing. The first book that I published on Reiki was called the Reiki Magic Guide to Self-Attunement. It didn't come out until 2007, but I actually wrote it in 1999. And so, then around 2003, I had an experience at Omega Institute in a different modality called vortex healing, which is
mm,
very fascinating and kind of connecting to the energy of Merlin. So again, I'm just kind of giving you a whole timeline.
yeah.
Then in 2007, the same year that the Reiki Magic Guide to Self-Attunement was going to come out, I was doing the final edits. This was like in January of 2007. And I had this very profound mystical experience while I was in Asia. I was in Laos. I was in the former Laotian capital called Luang Prabang, which used to be their royal capital many, many years ago. And I got very, very sick.
Mm,
And while I was sick, I had the urge to see a doctor, but all the guidebooks said that if you can avoid going to a Laotian hospital, it's probably much better than
mm,
to avoid it than it is to go in, because you're more likely to come out of the hospital with something much worse than what you had going into it.
mm,
Um, so I just basically hid in my room for a couple of days straight and just did nonstop energy healing on myself.
mm.
I had a fever, my spleen was swollen. Um, wasn't sure what was going on, but it felt rough. And while I was doing energy healing on myself, at a certain point, I actually heard a voice in my head say, "Would you like a new spleen?" And I said,
Mm.
"Yes." And then instantly I felt fine. Now, am I saying physically that a new spleen appeared in my body? No, but I am convinced that there was some kind of instantaneous transmutation, some energetic miracle that occurred in that moment where suddenly the disease, whatever was going on, was just suddenly gone.
Wow.
And I really feel, looking back on this whole thing, I feel like it was a test. Like, is this guy really willing to put his money where his mouth is?
Mm.
Is he able to really stand behind this work? Because if so,
Sure.
then maybe there's a gift for him on the other side. So and again, this is all hindsight, but I feel like, okay, I passed that test. Moved through this just using energy healing, and then I was very hungry because I'd been hiding in my room for a couple days. And so I went out to eat some. There was a little Indian food establishment not far from the guest house where I was, and I ordered my favorite dish, aloo gobi. I sat down. There were these little plastic tables and plastic chairs outside. It was basically like somebody cooking out of their home.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting in this plastic chair near this plastic table. And there's what I think is an empty chair adjacent to me. And suddenly I felt this amazing presence just appear in that chair, and instantly I knew that that presence was the spirit of Mikao Usui, who's the founder of Reiki, who had died,
Wow.
many decades before that moment.
Mm.
And I felt from him this ball of white light come into the area of my heart chakra, and it put me into kind of an altered state that I was actually went into and out of for a period of weeks. So during this altered state, I would just feel like I would feel that kind of eternal presence that exists in all things, like in a spoon or a glass of water, or
Mhm.
that just kind of sense of eternity. Uh,
Mhm.
you can call it divine or God, whatever name you want to put on that. It was just I was seeing that everywhere, everything I would look at. And it would also, at the same time, I would sometimes see these very, very complex mathematical equations in my mind's eye that I'm not a mathematician, but
Mhm.
they were very complex, wild equations that, included not just numbers, but also color and musical notation. So and when I would see these, that's when I would have this sense of like the eternal presence in all things. And so I was dropping in and out of the state of consciousness off and on for a period of weeks over time, and again, I didn't realize this immediately, but over time, I began to realize that ball of light was more than just a ball of light,
Mhm.
that actually there was an energetic structure that was now existing in my field. And I call it the Reiki crystal. So if you can imagine not a physical crystal, but an energetic crystal that's made out of the light of Reiki, now sitting right in front of my heart chakra.
Mm.
And I came to understand and realize that if I spoke to that crystal, first, I used my voice, but eventually I realized I don't even need to use my voice. I could just use my mind to talk to it,
Mm.
that it could send Reiki to whatever I asked it to send to. And that Reiki actually felt quite strong. It could
Wow.
also do things with Reiki that weren't traditionally possible. It could create certain shapes with the energy.
Huh.
It could create what I call Reiki hologram. So if you could imagine a particular organ as Reiki, and then it would infuse that into that organ or organ system.
Mm.
It could also bring me or others into very specific meditative states very quickly. So it just seemed to offer a lot of things that traditional Reiki doesn't offer. And so I worked with this system for a while, and eventually I wrote a couple books about it, called it Psychic Reiki, which is not so much about that it was opening up your psychic ability, but more about the fact that you're in psychic communication with this energetic crystal that then is doing whatever you're asking it to do with Reiki.
Huh.
Um, so that's sort of one branch of one one path of my energy healing modalities. That same year though, in 2007, for whatever reason, there was just a lot of things opening for me. So later in that year, in June of that year, I was getting my 5th level training in vortex healing, which again is it's a
Mhm.
system I don't teach, but I have a lot of respect for. And I was training in the 5th level. It was a 12-day training on the island of Mallorca in Spain. And literally at about an hour after that training was finished, I was in the swimming pool with my then girlfriend. She's my wife now. We're just in the swimming pool. And suddenly I just had this kind of opening experience where it's kind of the best way I can describe it is if you've seen the film The Matrix, where there's the ones and
Mhm.
zeros trickling across the screen, except it wasn't ones and zeros. It was like this trickling white light that I was seeing in the background of everything I would look at. So everything I would look at, there was just kind of this white light just trickling in the background,
Hmm.
and I had this immediate sense of like being in communion or communication with that energy or the intelligence of the energy, and it felt very connected to Merlin.
Wow.
uh, and just I'm gonna digress here for a moment. So in vortex healing, there's a very strong connection to Merlin, and they think of Merlin not so much just about, the wizard from King Arthur's court, but for them, they think of Merlin as being kind of that embodiment of divine healing magic. So the
Mm.
same way and connected to they believe there was actually an avatar
Wow.
in ancient India who embodied this. The same way that one could say that, Jesus embodied that sense of divine love and
Mhm.
compassion. In vortex healing, there's this belief that this avatar embodied that sense of divine healing magic. So it felt to me like this Merlin energy was talking to me. And initially, I was actually kind of confused because I thought, yeah, I just had a level 5 vortex training, and now I'm having this other experience, and Merlin's here, part of it. And have I just magically been turned into a vortex teacher or something? I didn't know. I didn't know what to do with it. I
Mhm.
was actually a little um, worried because I didn't want to be like transgressing on, on Rick Wyman and his work. So what I did is I tuned in and I about a week or so later I emailed Alexandra Marcourt, who used to be a vortex teacher, and she was the woman who had trained me through the first 4 levels. And I told her about my experience and just asked her if she could tune in because I wasn't sure what was going on.
Mm.
And she's also very clairvoyant and very wise, and I have a lot of respect for her. And she wrote back, "No, you have not become a vortex teacher. That's not what's going on." She goes, "But there is a new system that's coming through that feels a little more playful than Vortex, and that has a much deeper divine feminine presence than Vortex." And she said, "And you're supposed to bring it through into this realm." So as I worked with it more and more, it has over the years developed into this 9 level system that I call Magical Awakening. It's very, very playful. And I would say of all the things that I do energetically, it's the system that I love the most just because it has this very playful aspect to it.
Mm.
Um, So that came through in June in June of 2007, and then in the fall of 2007, I had another opening where there was another energy that came through that I call Light of the Eternal One,
Mm.
and, that one is much simpler. It's less known because I don't do that much to promote it,
Mm.
and it's not that I don't enjoy it, it's just it feels like it almost feels like it's not mine, right? And it really isn't, so I'll tell you a story around it. So this came through, right, came through in October of 2007, um, and what happened was I wrote a book about it, and then I would send the book out to different publishing houses, and, I would get almost the exact same answer each time, which was, "Oh, yeah, really like the book and this part and that part. Yeah, but we're not gonna publish it." And I'm like, "That's odd," 'cause I mean, as a writer, I've had certainly, stacks of rejection letters, and you get used to that.
Mhm.
But usually in a rejection, there's this sense of, "Oh, this doesn't align with us," or, "Oh, there's this problem." And here I was getting all these feedbacks from different publishers saying, yeah, how much they really liked the book and how they weren't gonna publish it. And I'm just kind of scratching my head like, "Well, this doesn't really make sense. There's something off here." And so I, had a shamanic healing with a woman named Nina Spiro who used to, come do work with the staff at Omega Institute, and she's a shamanic sound healer and does a lot of really beautiful work. And while I was working with her, at one point, we're on the Omega campus. We're in this large, uh, basically a small house on the Omega campus called the Hermitage. And we're sitting on the porch of the Hermitage. And at one point, I just felt this amazing presence appear. And this is while she's doing this
Mm.
session on me. She goes, What are you sensing right now?" I said, "Well, I sense this presence." I said, "But it's not a presence that I typically work with. And so I guess I'm not really sure where to go with it." And the whole session was around what's going on with this book. How come it's not getting published? And she goes, "Well, who is the presence?" I said, and so I asked, I tuned in, I said, "Well, the presence says that it's Ezekiel." I
Huh.
said, "Oh." She said, "Well, Ezekiel's here for a reason. So ask what Ezekiel has to tell you." And so I tuned in and I asked, and the answer that came back to me was that this light of eternal one energy actually is from the ancient Essenes. And, and the very clear message was, until you honor that in some way, your book is never gonna be published.
Wow. Hmm.
And so I'm like going, "Okay, well, it was it was great information to have, and it was also kind of
Hmm.
a paradox for me because as a writer, I always like to be able to source of, like, say, "Oh, here's why I'm making this claim, and this is why." And I had nothing to go on other than the shamanic
This
like
yeah, this download that you had. Yeah.
yeah, there's no historical data that I can point to, no scroll that I can point to that talks about something called the, light of the eternal one. And so what I did is I just put it like a short chapter, a short paragraph, like in the beginning introduction, mentioning the Essenes and how
Mhm.
and I think I referenced, this actual experience and that I wanted to honor them. And then literally it was like a week or 2 later after that, I ran into, um, Paul Cohen, who's the publisher at Monkfish. He had published one of my poetry books, which actually didn't do very well. And he lives in Rhinebeck, and I was in the store in Rhinebeck, and we had just bumped into each other. And we're casually talking. And I had mentioned to him that I had been trying to get this book published, and I never thought of Monkfish as a place that published energy healing books.
Mm.
But I just mentioned it to him casually, and he's like, "Oh, send it to us." And I sent it to him, and like a week or two later, he wrote that he emailed me that, "Yeah, we would like to publish this book." So it was like this really quick, like boom, boom, boom. So to me, that was my confirmation that yes, Light of the Eternal One does have a connection to the ancient scenes. Again, I
Oh,
have no historical data to show that, but just from my
wow.
experience of that, that's my belief. And it's a much simpler form than the other forms that I work with. And again, I love it. It's beautiful, but I just don't feel like it's mine. So I guess that's why I don't push it as much as like the psychic Reiki or the magical awakening, which I work with just almost on a daily basis, pretty much.
Wow. Brett, I mean, from a, guy who was going through pain in his mouth, to get wisdom tooth, procedure to now get all this wisdom, after it. I mean, do you ever sit back and I guess wonder the functionality of per se pain? Because it seems like from having, physical pain in your mouth, that led you, to a degree, onto this purpose. And so many people are dealing with pain, today. Like, how could they, maybe transform what's going on to them? Because it seems, from what I'm understanding, like you've been able to be, curiosity has led to a lot of breakthroughs in your path. And a lot of people have these awakenings, but they don't always probe it further. And you're a guy who's really probed whatever you've got. And you've always wanted to go more and push again. And I think that's really allowed you to not only be this incredible Reiki healer, but develop your own style of energy healing and this tremendous author and spiritual teacher. But it's amazing from one, what we say, kind of innocent, tooth procedure in the early 90s to the trajectory of the path that you're living today. It's fascinating to just observe and see.
You said something interesting at the beginning of that. You were talking about people in pain, how pain can be a teacher, and I do believe that that's true. And I think it's also part of the reason that I've gone in the direction I have with my work. And I'm not going to dive deep into my own personal story, but I will share enough to just kind of get the point across that yes, I had that pain in the early 1990s in my mouth that opened me to Reiki. But before then, I was very much searching for different healing possibilities because I had a very extremely dysfunctional childhood. A lot of physical abuse, sexual abuse, witnessed a murder when I was a toddler, like all kinds of just
Oh my
really
God.
nasty stuff. And I had done the traditional therapy thing, and I'm not knocking that. I got some use out of that. I got some
Mhm.
help from that. But I had done therapy. I was doing 12-step groups. I was basically reaching for anything to try to clean up the mess, the energetic mess of
Yep.
who I was. Because even when you've talked through, a trauma a number of times, just because you've talked about it a number of times doesn't mean that you've released that from
Mm.
your cells of your body, or you've released things from your karmic body or your Akashic records or all those other things that energy healing can start to address. And so I think for me, a lot of the techniques that I developed were really out of this sense of need or sense of like, how can I accelerate my own healing to be as fast as possible? Because I
Mm.
really don't want to be in therapy for the rest of my life. I don't want to have to be doing Reiki sessions every day on myself. And not that that's a bad thing, but I just felt like I had so much junk that I needed to move through. I'm like, I want to be able to live my life and be happy and enjoy it. I don't want to have to spend the rest of my life just trying to heal my past, right?
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of the techniques that I developed were based on that. And one of them I will share, for example, is in psychic Reiki. There's a technique that I refer to as Reiki lasers, and it's where the Reiki crystal can place an intense beam of Reiki light between any 2 points in time and space. And I talk about that technique in my books and stuff. But one thing that I was doing, and I was doing this for a while, particularly in the late 19, well, actually not in the late 1990s. a little bit in the late 1990s because I first discovered this technique when I was fusing together those higher self concepts that I was learning from Jack Gray with Reiki, and I found that that's really where you could create this Reiki laser, and then I incorporated that later into the psychic Reiki techniques. So what I would do sometimes is literally I would create these Reiki lasers running through my karmic body, literally intending that they were running through every lifetime, running through that first moment when my soul first split off from the divine, through my first lifetime, second lifetime, all the way through all the lifetimes up to the present moment. And it would just feel like, like just this huge amount of stuff being lifted. At the same time, I still had to work on trying to integrate that. So, but those really intense self-healings that I was doing to just try to lift and move through as much stuff as I could in the shortest amount of time possible. And so I think because of my own need to like, hey, I want to clean up as much of my life as quickly as possible so I could just get on with living and enjoying life. you know, I think that was really kind of the impetus for me to dive deep with each of these trajectories that has shown itself to me in terms of healing potentials with energy healing.
Wow. You're truly like the phoenix out of the ashes, where you experience the abyss that life has to offer. And I'm just so sorry to hear all the things that you experienced earlier on. Yeah, but it seems like I guess some people, when they experience something as adversive as that, they want the polar opposite. And when you had dysfunction, you wanted the best possible flow that you can have. You wanted grace, you wanted ease, and it seemed like Reiki was that opening to find that flow. And was it hard, to a degree where you're so used to dysfunction, all of a sudden you're feeling this beautiful flow? Did you push that away? Because sometimes things that we're not used to, we try to protect ourselves or reject. It's like a foreign thing. Like, how did you at first relate to this, peaceful thing? Was there a part of you that's like, no, like, things should start, I should start to get hit left and right by something. This isn't life. Like, this isn't, something's going to happen. Like, how did you psychologically recover from all that stuff to trust this source, to trust
Yeah,
this?
I think for me it was really I think from the very beginning it was this sense of like, wow, this sense of being held by the universe. And and one thing I forgot to mention is so with the master level attunement, I remember Mary Dudek saying this phrase, which I didn't learn until many years later, was actually a phrase that William Rand came up with. And it has to do with the master level attunement and the master level symbol. And the saying is, great being of the universe, shine on me, be my friend. And that for me, that kind of encapsulated the sense of what I felt after the master level attunement, where, a lot of things before then had felt like, struggles and, trauma. And then suddenly you're starting to feel like the entire universe is your friend, right?
Mm,
Like the whole universe is your friend. It kind of relates to that sense of grace that I felt the first time I felt Reiki, that sense of like that I was kind of being held by the universe in a sense.
wow.
And so in that, I think that there's kind of this tipping point where you realize, yeah, there's all this story and trauma and all this stuff, but it's story. And we can move past that and we can be in the present moment. And we can acknowledge the divine presence that's in everything. And we can start to, radiate more towards love and less towards injury and trauma and just, it kind of flips everything on its head. So yeah, I feel like that Reiki has been a real guiding source for me. And again, there are these other modalities that have come in, but for me, it really started with Reiki. And so that's been a real foundation for me in terms of the sense of like, oh, okay, the universe is my friend. There's this divine healing energy. It has intelligence. It's got my back. And so, yeah, I might have a bad day here and there, but once you know that the universe is your friend and there's this divine, like, wave that is pushing your life forward in a positive way, um, it makes a lot of those challenges seem less significant.
Wow. Yeah. That's beautiful. And it seemed like Albert Einstein was almost a Reiki guy because I think he propositioned, that same exact thing as a universe a friendly place, a place of ambivalence, or a place that's working against you. And
Mm,
how you're able to navigate and believe that that proposition will really determine the life that you live. Because within this human story, there's so much stuff that comes up to the surface, but you're able to understand a greater belief or a greater story beyond it. It allows, some space to handle, some of those stimuli and those challenges and those stressors more effectively. So that's beautiful. Yeah, well, Reiki is something that's getting a lot more mainstream, traction, these days. And, I think a lot of people are understanding it. For the average person, how do you feel the average person can invite Reiki into their lives? I know it may be hard for the average person to take all these trainings, become a master, stuff like that, but just for the common folk, like where do you feel people could lean into Reiki more, and what difference do you think that micro change could make on a macro level, would you say?
Yeah, so for me, it's interesting because my son is a big Star Wars fan. I mean, I like Star Wars too, but he's 11
And
years old. He's
uh,
really into Star Wars right now.
we're
And
recording a day after May the 4th, by the way, so there's a lot of Star Wars synchronicities, you know?
exactly, exactly. And if you notice in the last couple of, I think maybe it's the last one, uh I forget the title of that one, but like the ninth episode of that, George Lucas's original story, where they're actually starting to use the Force for healing, right? It's like
Mm.
somebody gets wounded. I forget the names of the characters. There's Ray, and then there's the other guy who's been kind of dark, uh, played by Adam Driver. And there's a point where they start using the Force for healing wounds, and so to me, that's like the perfect explanation of what is Reiki. If you can think of like that force, that energetic force, except instead of creating lightsabers and using it to to whack people, you're using it for healing, right? And that it has a divine intelligence to it. It has a wisdom to it, and it's moving through through everything. And yet, with the attunement, with the initiation that happens with Reiki, what happens is that it allows it to move through you quite strongly and in a way that you can call it in anytime you want it or need it.
Mm.
And so, again, that force analogy with the force, I think, is really the best one. Um, and it's always working for the highest good. So, you don't have to feel like you're interpreting anything. You don't have to feel like you're a doctor. You don't have to know, "Well, what's the cause of all this." You're just letting the energy do its work and getting out of the way.
Wow.
Um, you know,
Mm.
And it is becoming more popular. So now, we often find that it's offered now in terms of a form of palliative care in different hospitals. I, you know, Recently there were some friends of mine who had been under different minor surgical procedures, but then without even asking, the hospital would say, "Oh, would you do some Reiki?" So not every hospital is doing that, but some of the more progressive ones are.
Mhm.
So it is becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think was it the Cleveland Clinic that had, like, some type of code for Reiki as well? So it's certainly infiltrating itself, in medical, and I would say it was ahead of its time too, because as a psychotherapist, now the bigwig of therapy is somatic-based interventions and Reiki, and Dr. Usui was so far beyond his time. But it's funny that you're mentioning George Lucas, because I was just running a continuing education course yesterday on May 4th, and I
Uh-huh.
mentioned how George Lucas, in his later teens, early 20s, was involved in a motor vehicle accident, I believe on a motorcycle. He had a near-death experience, it was believed, and that's where the understanding of the Force emanated from, it was believed. So,
Oh,
really
wow.
cool a day after discussing this that we're talking about the Force, but the origin behind that, was believed that he had a near-death experience in a motor vehicle accident, and that's where he had all these spiritual understandings of the Force. So, it's really fascinating how you were able to tie that in, but also just yeah, Reiki is just that universal life force that we are all able to connect to. And that's the beauty of Reiki is it starts with Reiki 1. Can you tell us a little bit about Reiki 1 and how maybe people could utilize this universal life force and stuff like that?
Yeah. So in Reiki 1, a person receives what's called an attunement, which is basically an initiation from a Reiki master,
Mhm.
where sacred Reiki symbols are put into a person's crown chakra here at the top of the head and also into their hands. And basically, the way I think of that is it's like a software download, right? So once that energetic software is downloaded into your field, then you can access the energy of Reiki. At level one, you learn how to do a treatment on yourself. So you learn different hand positions for doing healing on yourself. And you also learn hand positions for doing a healing on another person.
Mm.
Um, and like I said, my first level with Reiki 1 was very, very powerful for me with El Capetra Palm.
Mm.
Level 2 is a little bit more involved, and it involves another initiation. So you're initiated again, another attunement, symbols going into the crown, into the hands. But this time, you actually learn 3 of those symbols, and you learn how to use them. So, one of the symbols kind of increases the energetic volume. So you're able to turn up that amplifier, like make the energy flow stronger. Another one allows you to focus it for mental emotional healing, and a third of which allows you to send Reiki distantly through time and space. And that's the one that really blew my mind open. So once I had second degree Reiki, I was like, wow, I can explore the whole timeline of my soul, right? I can send Reiki backwards in time to that moment when my soul first split off from the divine. I can send Reiki to my previous life. I can send Reiki forward in time to my death. I can send Reiki to myself in the womb. Like, so I felt like I just kind of went nuts. So just wanted to do all this healing work just on my soul. And so it just really opened my consciousness in a huge way. And then master level in the lineage I learned it is level 3. And master level, you receive another initiation, again, symbols in the crown and in the hands. And you learn 6 symbols to be able to replicate that initiation for other people so that you can also then initiate other people into Reiki and then teach them. Um, there are some schools that break that third part up into 2 parts. So you may often hear people saying
ART maybe, or
Reiki has a 4-degree system.
yes.
But I have good friends who have learned it as a 4-degree system, and I learned it as a 3-degree system, and when we kind of share notes and compare, it's really the same thing. It's just that there are some schools that decide to break that part 3 up into 2 parts. And their reasons for that are very legitimate. It's not how I choose to do it, but I can understand their reasons. And the reasons for that is that in those schools, they believe that there's some people that may just want the healing capacity of that master level and yet not necessarily want to go on to be a teacher. So for them, they offer that for them, that level 3 is what they would call master practitioner, where it's more just about you as a healer. And then they have a 4th level, which then they call master teacher. Uh, the way I teach it, you just learn that all as one thing. But again, it's not that one is right or one is wrong. They're just different ways of sharing the same information.
What do you think the universe was trying to maybe download to Usui when he started with the system working on the individual and then working its way, towards healing other people? What kind of principle do you feel, that was trying to highlight, if you will, we're, starting with the individual when it comes to healing?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Asui that we don't emphasize enough, I think, is that um, for him, Reiki was not just about healing; it was about a path of spiritual awakening. It was about enlightenment, and there are writings. And William Rand does a lot of really amazing research on this, and
Mhm.
I've been in a lot of events that he's been part of, so I always hear him talking about these. So I wish I had like the direct quotes of saying, which book or what text to look at.
Mm.
But um, there's a lot of information that uh, he has uncovered uh, that suggests that while Sui was alive, that there was something in the lineage where that when you got master level, like you would just become enlightened, right?
Mhm.
And then apparently something energetically shifted when Asui died. That's no longer, like, built into the system, like, it's not like every Reiki master is suddenly, like, an enlightened human being, but apparently, again, from what we can tell in terms of looking at a lot of the writings that were happening, when Asui was still in a body, that when a person would receive the master level, that they would just awaken spiritually.
Mhm.
So again, that was a big part of the teachings was about a path of awakening. And it's not that that is totally lost now, but I think it hasn't been emphasized as much in Western culture
Hmm.
as I think was his original intention. I think originally, like, yes, Reiki can heal, but it's a path to know your own soul and know your own spiritual truth.
Yeah. I also think too, like part of his working on ourselves that you're thinking micro by starting with macro by starting with the micro and
Yeah.
thinking globally by acting locally. And it first starts with working on yourself before you give to others. And sometimes we try to bypass our own stuff because we vicariously feel like we're healing through helping. And we are to a degree, but we're more effective as healers, you would say, probably by starting with our own stuff and then working, our way up to other people, right?
I totally agree with that, and I feel, it's interesting because I'm working on a manuscript right now. One of the chapters, or in one of the chapters, I talk about this idea of uh, each Reiki practitioner, that the energy is developing you to be a citizen of peace,
Mm.
right? Because even with the precepts, in terms of the things that it asks you to focus on, being kind, being grateful, not worrying, not being angry, it's almost like this model for being a citizen of peace in the world, and so maybe if enough people embody that, then maybe on the macro, yeah, maybe that is when we start to have peace in the world. Maybe
Yeah.
that is when the wars start to end, when people are really embodying that sense of being citizens of peace.
Mm. Yeah. One of my final questions before I know you offered to give a healing to my audience, which we're going to absolutely love, and we certainly need it at this time. I know you. For myself, I work in the field of past life regression therapy and things of that sort. But I love the quote by Henry Ford that said that genius or gifts are not a result of, one lifetime, but accumulation of many different lifetimes. And certainly, you've put in the man hours and a lot of work, as a healer. But I know you mentioned a lot of your past lives. When you connect to the past life field, were you also, someone that was a shamanic practitioner or healer, or this just started Brett Bevell, this incarnation and this lifetime?
It's interesting you mentioned this because one of the workshops that I took at Omega many, many years ago, and I really loved it. I took a few different workshops with the remote viewer David Morehouse. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or his work.
Mm,
Um, and in one of the classes, it wasn't the level one; it was more advanced class that he was teaching at Omega. Um, in remote viewing, they give you these targets that you are usually just a series of numbers, like you don't even know what you're looking at, right?
mhm,
But in this one instance, the target was the timeline of your own soul, right? And again, I get this series of numbers, have no idea what the target is, and I'm doing my remote viewing, and everybody else in the room is doing their own remote viewing. And I remember in that remote viewing experience, I kept seeing things like, sacred temples and robes and being just in these mystical orders and things like that. And again, this is really going through the whole soul experience. So I do feel it in my soul's progression that there have been many times when I have been, whether it's in ancient Egypt or ancient Greece or probably even times maybe on other planets, who knows, where I've been involved in trying to understand that mystical connection at a deeper way and often focusing it for healing.
wow. Yeah. I had a feeling it wasn't just
Yeah.
it just logically doesn't make sense. It had to explain Mozart at age 3 just playing the piano or, just some of these athletes at such a young age, whether that's Rory McIlroy, Tiger Woods at such a young age playing it's just thing you can't teach. So that makes a lot of sense. Um, before we get it, because I know you mentioned this generous offering of healing, where is the best place for people to find your work and to connect with you, and also do you offer any types of teachings or any seminars coming up that people could also utilize or follow too?
Yeah, so there's I have 2 websites. One of them is on my name there, right? There's
Yeah.
academyofloveandlight.us, and that has a number of different online courses that I have that are very useful, different trainings and some of the modalities like Light of the Eternal One, the Magic
Mhm.
Awakening. uh, Psychic Reiki, things like that. I also often do, very frequent do live healings on Zoom, so those are also listed there. Um, and then for my more in-person stuff, if you go to Brett Bevell, my name, so just brettbevell.com, there's a live dates section, and that will show you where I'm teaching in person.
Mhm.
And most of my in-person events tend to be weekend workshops at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies in Rhinebeck, New York.
Mm.
So I am teaching a level 1 and 2 the weekend of June 12th through 14th. And then I also have a master level that I'm teaching uh, September 18th through 20th. And then there's another event that I'm part of called Harmonizing Oneness, which is a multi faculty event. It's not a training, but it's more about, again, becoming a citizen of peace and really using these different modalities to work on ourselves as citizens of peace. And that's going to involve William Rand, Karen Noe,
Mm.
Stephen Farrell, myself,
Wow.
a woman named Paris Shakti, and an amazing drummer named Avinash. And so that's, again, that's not a training, but it's just more like a weekend where we're really radiating that energy of peace. And it also happens to be on the 25th anniversary, or the first night is on the 21st anniversary of 9/11. So I feel like there's
Mhm.
kind of a large synchronicity of energies there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so either brettbevel.com or academyofloveandlight.us. If you're looking for live events, go to brettbevel.com. If you're looking for online things where you can just learn at your own pace, go to academyofloveandlight.us. If you want to contact me, there is a contact the author button on brettbevel.com. You just put your message in there, you hit it, and then it comes to me.
Yeah. And all your books on your website as well too, correct? They could find your books there? Yeah.
Yeah, they can find my books. They can also, there's the deck that I'm going to do the healing with, which is called the Reiki Divine Healing card deck. That's my most recent work, which came out in 2024, and it's a beautiful deck. So happy to share that healing too.
Yeah, do check out, Brett's awesome events. Check him out at the Omega. He's got, incredible events, and it's just wonderful to see, someone who's like a student of the Omega now is just running workshops with William Rand and is a big contributor to a wonderful organization. So, thank you for, your contribution to humanity and really globalizing, this dream of peace and making it actualized. So,
Thank you. And again, I really appreciate you in terms of what you offer at Omega, and also appreciate you just being here and having your podcast and allowing me the privilege of being part of it.
yeah. Yeah, so we would lastly love to see your deck. I know you mentioned that you're gonna be providing the healing. Yeah, tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'll let you lead the
I'll,
floor.
I'll I'll talk very briefly about the deck so that people have a concept, and it's uh there's 44 cards. The cards are right here. I didn't really plan ahead of time for this, so I'm just going to kind of randomly wing it. But the really cool thing about this deck, and this is hard sometimes for people to conceptualize, is that each card, if you remember earlier, I was talking about that Reiki crystal, right? Each
Mhm.
card in this deck is empowered to its own Reiki crystal. And so just bear with me for a moment. So if Reiki crystal, if the energy of Reiki has divine intelligence to it, right? So if there's a Reiki crystal in any of these cards, in each card, each of those cards has intelligence. It's going to hear what I say. It's going to listen to what I ask it to do, right? And again, I know that's a bit of an esoteric concept, but in this healing I'm going to offer, I'm literally just going to talk to the cards. I'm not going to send an ounce of energy. This is all just coming from the cards. And again, this is the Reiki Divine Healing card deck. Um, so I'm just what I'm going to do for the healing, I'm going to show the cards so people can see it, and I'll
Mhm.
just send it to something. And then I'm just going to kind of go through the deck and I may not get through all of the deck because there's 44 cards, but I'll get through a lot of it. Okay. So, those of you who are watching, just sit back, relax. The first card I'm going to pick, and again, I'm just randomly picking them. This is the Reiki crystal, and just inviting this card to send Reiki now to your brain and nervous system right now. And as that's kind of kicking in, I'm just going to go in with other cards and just have them send energy too. So this card is of uh, the master symbol. It's called Dekamyo. And Dekamyo also has a very strong healing function. So asking this card now to send the cameo energy to wherever it is that you need it most. And again, we're letting the divine intelligence of the energy figure that out. I don't know where you need it, but the energy knows. So for some of you, that might be your knee. Some of you might be your lungs. For some of you, it might be
Mm.
something on the mental emotional field, whatever it is. Just inviting this card to send Reiki to wherever you need it most. This is one of the second degree symbols you learn. It's called Chokure.
Mhm.
Inviting this card now to send Chokure energy to your respiratory system, to your lungs, your sinuses, all the airways in your body, all receiving Reiki now. This card's the Reiki sphere of divine grace, which is one of the energetic structures mentioned in Psychic Reiki. So, inviting this card to create around you the Reiki sphere of divine grace, which, if you could see, it would be like a huge bubble or a huge egg filled with the light of Reiki, totally enveloping you on all levels.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And this Reiki card, I call it's got a non-traditional symbol in it, which is for forgiveness. So it's not one of the traditional Reiki symbols, but it's a symbol that I channeled in. It was part of my book called Reiki for Spiritual Healing. And I'm inviting this card to bring you into a Reiki meditation for forgiveness, to help you forgive either something about yourself. Maybe you need to forgive yourself for something, or maybe if there's some issue with somebody else that feels unresolved, and if you feeling like forgiveness there would help you if you forgive that person. Just asking this card to bring you into a Reiki meditation for forgiveness. And this is for karmic body Reiki, asking this card to send Reiki to your karmic body. And I'm going to do, because sometimes it works better when I just combine a lot of cards too and just have them
Yep.
send. So, uh, having universal Reiki healing grid, a meditation for self love, and a technique called Reiju. And I'm asking these cards to activate and synchronize and send a wave of healing light out to you now. We'll grab another set of cards. Uh, Reiki for Cosmic Awakening, Saint Germain, and Mikawasui, asking these cards to activate and synchronize and send a wave of healing light out to you now. We have Emotional Body, Reiki, Cellular Meditation, and the Honchazation and Distance symbol, asking these cards to activate and synchronize and send healing light out to you now.
Mm.
And again, I don't think we're going to have time to go through all the cards. So I'm just going to find one that I think would be a nice way to end with. So, um, this is the Chakra Reiki card. So asking this card to now send Reiki to all of your chakras.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful. Yeah. Mm.
And so again, I wish I had prepared better because I probably would have pre-selected certain cards and just have them ready to go. But the cool thing about the deck is that the deck itself can send you the healing. You don't even need to be initiated into Reiki because the cards are initiated into Reiki.
Yeah.
All you do is you ask them to send Reiki towards whatever the issue is. And if you have time, I want to share just one last thing about a
Yes, please.
very remarkable healing that I had with
Yeah.
the deck. So, shortly after the deck came out, I was in a car accident.
Mm.
And the car accident, I hate to say this, but the car accident was my fault, right?
Mm.
It was my lack of attentiveness at a certain point when I was driving with my wife, and we were in a heated conversation, and I wasn't paying
Mhm.
attention to something, and it was totally my fault. And luckily, nobody was, severely injured or anything, um, but I felt, not good about the fact that I had caused an auto accident,
Mhm.
and, I was also worried because I was like, "Wow, what's this gonna mean for my driver's license?" Like, what's
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
all that kind of
All that
anxiety
human
going on,
stuff came up. Yep.
right?
Yeah.
What's it gonna mean for my insurance? Like, all this stuff is going on, and so I think it was like a day or 2 after the accident, and the way I use this deck is I have it on my altar, and I'll usually pick out, like, 3 cards, and I'll have them focus on something, and then every day I'll work on that issue. So, I picked the forgiveness card, I picked the Jesus card, and I think I picked the Amma card, which for
Mm.
me, kind of embodies that sense of divine grace for me. And again, there are a number of different spiritual beings that are
Mhm.
listed in the deck too.
But that
So it's
really speaks to you a lot.
yeah, that speaks to me. And again, there's angel cards in the deck. There's cards in the deck that are connected to Buddha or Kuan Yin or Jesus or you know. So there's a lot of possibilities for someone to work with. Um, so what I did is I put those cards on my altar and I just said every morning I would say I'm activating these cards to send forgiveness out to everybody involved with that situation, right? Forgiveness for me, forgiveness for my wife because I felt like she was really distracting me in that moment that I was driving. Forgiveness to everything that helped create that situation from the beginning. And I did that just every day. And eventually that sense of anxiety and kind of
Mhm.
that I felt was totally gone.
Yeah.
But for me, this is the real kicker. I would have thought that, for me, basically making an illegal turn, it resulted in an auto accident that happened on a highway. It wasn't like a small road, it was a highway where people are going
Mhm.
55 miles an hour. Somebody could have been really hurt, right? So I
Mhm.
felt very guilty, and also I thought, "Man, I'm gonna have my license revoked, all kind of stuff's gonna
Mhm.
go on."
Mhm.
What happened when it went through the legal system is, I got a $25 fine and no
Yeah.
points.
Mm.
To me, it's not that I was asking for that, I was just asking to be forgiven, right? And I felt like the way the energy wove, it wove not just for me personally, but it felt like it kind of wove itself into the energetic fabric of the universe, which
Mhm.
included the energetic fabric of the legal system.
Mhm.
And so I ended up paying a $25 fine and having no points. And again, I'm not saying that one needs to be flippant and say, "Oh, well, I can be reckless and just be forgiven." That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying when you really sincerely do this work that you're asking to for forgiveness to truly happen, where you feel fully absolved of something, for me, that it worked in that way. And so I just like to share that story because I feel like I think everybody has made errors in their life.
Mhm.
And if we can find that level of forgiveness through working through this tool, uh, I just wanted to share that with folks.
Wow. Beautiful story, and it just shows how we're all interconnected and that energy that we put out, it's received, and it's a beautiful story. So thank you for sharing that, and thank goodness you and your spouse and everyone at hand is okay and has healed from that. So it's a beautiful message, and thank you for this incredible healing on so many levels. And I know my audience members are going to eat up every one of your words, and I do encourage them to really check out your work as well as your incredible books, your beautiful cards, and all things Brett Bevell. So thank you so much for sharing your heart energy, your Reiki, your beautiful story, and all of your wisdom with our viewers today.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for having me on your podcast, and I look forward to seeing you at Omega when you're there with the weekend
Wisdom from
and
beyond the veil. Yep.
Wisdom from Beyond the Veil. I was about to say Wisdom of I'm like, "No, it's not Reiki." When
I
wisdom's in
mean,
the title, my mind gets confused, right?
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
Wisdom
There's a
Beyond the
lot of
Veil with you
wisdom,
and
Jacob's
Karen and
ladder, wisdom from beyond the veil. A lot of wisdom tooth. Like we're all tuning into the same stuff here. So,
yeah.
yep, yep. All right. Thanks, Brett. We'll be in touch and would love to have you come back whenever you want to. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jacob. You have a wonderful day.
That was a wonderful conversation with Brett. I learned so much about Reiki, energy healing, and I hope you were able to really learn a lot more skills and tools to incorporate in your everyday life. And you also got a healing from Brett's presence as well as his direct healing that he gave to us. Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope to see you here next time on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder.